Trevor Brennan jumps into stands.
January 2007, rugby fans got a glimpse of what the UFC feels like when one player decided to act wacko. During a Heineken Cup match between Toulouse and Ulster, Irish-born lock Trevor Brennan, who was playing for Toulouse at the time, suddenly climbed into the stands and physically assaulted an Ulster supporter. It almost reminds you of the Eric Cantona incident when he jumped into the crowd and kicked a fan during his time at Manchester United. But that's soccer. This is rugby, and at the time of this crazy Trevor Brennan assault, fans had never witnessed a player attacking a supporter before. The match itself had been tense, but no one could have predicted what came next. Brennan claimed that the fan had insulted his mother. Well, yeah, that's what fans do. Anyway, eyewitnesses later disputed that version, saying there were no such personal insults. Instead, they argued that the fan had merely shouted harmless chants about Brennan's bar in Toulouse. Regardless of what was actually said, there was no excuse for what Brennan did. Leaping into the crowd and punching a fan crossed every possible line. It was unheard of in the sport, which is why the world was left speechless afterwards. As you would expect, the authorities were not going to let Brennan get away with his unruliness. The ERC, European Rugby Cup, acted swiftly and banned him for life from playing professional rugby. This was a very rare type of punishment and reflected just how serious the sports authorities took the matter. However, Brennan appealed, and after further review, the life ban was reduced to a 5-year suspension. But Brennan had become worse than sour milk by then. The incident raised questions about player discipline, crowd interaction, and even fan behaviour. But no matter what provoked it, most agreed that Brennan's reaction was unacceptable. He later retired from the sport and turned to writing and running his bar business in France. Some fans continued to support him, saying the ban was too harsh, given the emotional trigger. Others believed he had disgraced the game. The story made international headlines not just because of the violence, but because Brennan was already a big name. He had played for Ireland, made a strong impact in French rugby, and was known for his aggressive style. But in this case, that aggression spilled into the wrong place. It also showed us how rugby's image as a respectful sport with honourable conduct can still turn into a round of Street Fighter in a single moment. And unless you're a fan of hard kicks and uppercuts, this was one of the most dramatic and regrettable player moments in rugby history.
Duncan McCrae punches Ronan Ogara. Speaking of fighting like wild dogs, during a 2001 match between the New South Wales Waratahs and the touring British and Irish Lions, Australian fullback Duncan McCrae did something that stunned viewers across the rugby world. In the middle of play, McCrae tackled Irish fly half Ronan Ogara to the ground. That's normal, right? But what followed was something straight out of a Van Damme movie. As Ogara lay defenceless on the turf, McCrae unleashed 11 dirty punches directly to the poor guy's face. It was brutal and completely one-sided. Ogara was left bloodied, bruised, and needed 8 stitches around his eye. Players rushed in to break it up, but the damage had already been done. The referee gave McCrae a straight red card and he was immediately sent off. After the match, fans and commentators were outraged. Even in a sport as physical as rugby, what McCrae did went far beyond what's acceptable. It wasn't a mistimed tackle or a heated push. It was a calculated and repeated attack on a player who wasn't defending himself. As if that wasn't bad enough, the disciplinary process was pretty useless because McCrae received only a 7-week ban for his actions. Like, what the heck? Many felt this punishment was far too lenient. Given the severity of the punches and the fact that Ogara had clearly been targeted and seriously injured, some expected a suspension closer to 6 months. However, the hearing ruled that McCrae had acted out of character and showed remorse after the incident. He later apologised to Ogara and admitted he had let his emotions get the better of him. Even so, that apology didn't fully erase the memory of what had happened. The match itself faded from memory, but the punch-up did not. For years, clips of the incident were shared and debated, and it became one of the most well-known examples of violence in modern rugby. Ogara, to his credit, continued his tour and later became one of Ireland's greatest players. Sorry, Duncan, but it'll take more than a busted eye to stop this dude. Matt Stevens fails drug test. In December 2008, England prop Matt Stevens shocked the rugby world when he said to himself, "Hey, why don't I do some cocaine tonight?" At the time, he was playing for Bath and had already earned multiple caps for England. He had also built a reputation as a strong and reliable front-row player with a bright future. But off the field, Stevens was struggling with personal issues, including substance abuse. That all came to light when a random drug test revealed cocaine in his system after a match. The reaction was swift and severe. The Rugby Football Union handed him a 2-year ban from the sport, and Stevens accepted the punishment without appeal. He also went public with his story, admitting that he had a problem and that he had let down his teammates, fans, and family. His honesty drew some sympathy, but the damage to his career and reputation was clear. A 2-year absence from rugby at the top level is huge, especially for a player in his prime. Stevens used the time away from the game to turn his life around. He entered rehab, worked on his mental health, and kept himself fit. He also spoke openly about addiction, helping to raise awareness about how even professional athletes can fall into dangerous habits. When his ban ended, many wondered if he could ever return to his previous level. But in one of the sport's most inspiring comeback stories, he did exactly that. In 2010, Stevens joined Saracens and slowly worked his way back into form. His performances improved so much that he was selected again for the England squad. By 2011, he was back in the national jersey, and in 2013, he was chosen for the British and Irish Lions tour to Australia. This was something few believed would happen after his suspension. While the initial ban had been seen as harsh by some, especially since it was for recreational rather than performance-enhancing drugs, most agreed that it was necessary to uphold the sport's standards. Stevens' story is now often used as an example of how to sniff coke, get caught, and bounce back stronger. Wendell Sailors' cocaine ban. Guess what? Another cokehead makes the list, and it's Wendell Sailor, one of Australia's most famous dual-code rugby players. He had already made a name for himself in rugby league with the Brisbane Broncos and the Australian national team before switching to rugby union in 2001. He joined the New South Wales Waratahs and quickly became a key figure in the Wallabies setup. With his speed, power, and charisma, Sailor was seen as a real crowd puller and a strong marketing figure for the sport. However, everything changed in May 2006. After a routine drug test following a Super Rugby match, Sailor tested positive for cocaine. He was immediately stood down by the Waratahs and the Australian Rugby Union. Not long after, he admitted that he had used the drug recreationally during a night out, not to gain a competitive advantage. Still, under the strict anti-doping rules in rugby, the context of the drug use did not matter. Sailor received a 2-year ban from all forms of rugby. This punishment was in line with World Anti-Doping Agency guidelines at the time. He did not appeal the ban. Instead, he accepted full responsibility for his actions and stepped away from the game. The timing of the ban was devastating to his rugby union career. He was already in his early 30s and playing at a high level, but the ban effectively ended his time in the 15-man code. The incident generated plenty of media coverage in Australia. Some fans were shocked, others were disappointed. There was also debate about whether the 2-year ban was too harsh for a recreational drug. However, the sport's zero-tolerance policy was clear. It was a lesson that even top-level players with superstar status would face the full consequences of their actions. Interestingly, Sailor managed to come back not in rugby union but back in rugby league. In 2008, after serving his suspension, he signed with the St George Illawarra Dragons and played until 2009. Though he never reached his former heights, his return was seen as a redemption story of sorts. Well, Sailor wasn't completely ruined, as he later became a media personality and used his experience to teach fellow junkies about the dangers of drug use. Chiliboy Ralapel doping offences. Chiliboy Ralapel was a trailblazer in South African rugby. He became the first black player to captain a South African national side when he led the Springboks in a midweek tour match back in 2006. As a talented hooker, he had all the tools to enjoy a long and successful international career. But unfortunately, that journey was disrupted not once but twice by doping violations that would stain his legacy. Talk about a real knucklehead. The first major incident happened in 2014. While playing in France for Toulouse, Ralapel tested positive for drostanolone, an anabolic steroid known to enhance muscle growth and strength. The test came during a routine check, and he was immediately suspended. He was later handed a 2-year ban, which was consistent with World Rugby's anti-doping policies. Ralapel claimed the substance may have entered his system through a supplement, but that explanation did not change the final outcome. After serving the ban, he returned to professional rugby and even played again for the Springboks. However, in 2019, while playing for the Sharks in South Africa, he failed another doping test, this time for the banned substance Zeranol. This was part of an out-of-competition test conducted by the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport. The findings led to an 8-year suspension, one of the longest ever given to a South African player. Ralapel denied any wrongdoing and maintained his innocence. He argued that the substance could have come from contaminated meat or supplements. However, the disciplinary panel found no evidence to support that claim. The ruling emphasised that athletes are responsible for everything that enters their body, regardless of intent. And because of his history and the nature of the substance, the panel issued the maximum penalty allowed for a second offence. This second ban effectively ended his career, because at the time of the ruling, Ralapel was already 33 years old. And an 8-year absence meant there was no realistic chance of a professional return. Many saw the ban as harsh, and when I say many, I mean guys who like to do dope and whine about it when they get caught. But what made Ralapel's case even more tragic was his status as a symbol of progress in South African rugby. He had broken barriers and inspired the kids, but now his career will now always be linked to doping, and that sucks. Elton Jantjies tests positive. Elton Jantjies was once one of the brightest stars in South African rugby. As a fly half, he brought flair, unpredictability and attacking energy to every team he played for. He had over 40 caps for the Springboks and played a crucial part in several test matches under head coach Rassie Erasmus. But as you would expect with guys who love breaking the law, his time was up by 2023. In June of that year, Jantjies tested positive for clenbuterol, a banned performance-enhancing substance often used in weight loss and muscle-building programs. The test was conducted by the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport. He was immediately provisionally suspended and later handed a 4-year ban after the B sample confirmed the result. Clenbuterol is a substance often linked to doping scandals across multiple sports. It increases oxygen transport and promotes lean muscle growth. Though it is sometimes found in contaminated meat in certain countries, athletes are still held strictly responsible. Jantjies claimed that he did not knowingly take the drug. However, he failed to provide a clear and convincing explanation of how it entered his system. That made the ban inevitable. The rugby community reacted strongly to the news. Many were disappointed, while others were not entirely surprised due to earlier controversies in Jantjies' career. Off the field, he had already faced a string of personal problems, including a high-profile affair and disciplinary issues. These events had already kept him out of the Springboks' plans for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. By the time the ban was confirmed, Jantjies was in his early 30s. A 4-year absence would mean he would not play again at the highest level. Most observers agreed that this marked the end of his professional rugby career. The ban also meant that any possible return to the Springboks or a big club contract would be out of reach. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some thought it was unfortunate and hoped he would be able to rebuild his life. Others felt that given the strict rules and his experience as a professional, there was no excuse. The ruling was consistent with WADA guidelines and showed that even high-profile players would not get special treatment. Jantjies' story remains a warning for younger players to stay away from performance-enhancing drugs because, look, rugby isn't for everyone. If you can't play without a boost, you can always work at McDonald's. Stephen Heita doping sanction. Stephen Heita's case may not be the most high-profile in rugby history, but it stands out for the sheer number of substances involved and how seriously the authorities treated it. In February 2019, Heita, who was capped internationally for Romania and also played club rugby in the UK, was hit with a major doping charge. His urine sample tested positive not 1, not 2, but 3 banned substances: stanozolol metabolites, methandienone metabolites, and tamoxifen metabolites. I mean, this guy was the Swiss Army knife of dope. Each of these substances on its own is enough to cause serious concern under World Rugby's anti-doping regulations. Together, they painted a clear picture of a performance-enhancing drug regime. Stanozolol and methandienone are anabolic steroids. They're banned because they artificially build muscle and improve recovery, giving players an unfair physical edge. Tamoxifen, on the other hand, is a masking agent often used to counteract side effects from steroid use. That combination is what made the case so clear-cut for regulators. It wasn't just a trace amount of one drug or a contaminated supplement. This looked deliberate. Heita denied knowingly taking anything illegal, but his defence didn't hold. The Rugby Football Union handed him a 4-year suspension starting from June 2019. That meant he couldn't play or be involved in the sport in any official capacity until June 2023. At the time of the ban, he was in his early 30s, which meant the suspension took away some of his final years as a competitive athlete. The case didn't generate massive media headlines, but it was closely watched within rugby circles. Some commentators noted that while the ban was standard under World Rugby rules, the case reminded everyone that doping exists even at levels below the top international stage. In fact, that's part of what made it so important. It showed that drug testing doesn't just focus on elite tier stars, but is enforced across all competitive levels. There was no major appeal or controversy in the aftermath. Heita served his time, and as of now, he has not returned to play at a known professional level. His case is still used in educational talks on doping in rugby, especially when explaining how certain substances interact and why tamoxifen use raises red flags. The World Anti-Doping Agency and national unions continue to reference examples like his when training officials and warning players. In short, Stephen Heita's 4-year ban was serious, straightforward, and served as a clear message. Whether the intention behind his actions was truly malicious or just careless, the consequences were the same. Rugby authorities made it clear that the sport has no room for performance-enhancing drugs, especially when players start to make cocktails out of it. Reinard Landman's steroid ban. Reinard Landman is a familiar name in Welsh rugby, and especially among fans of the Dragons. However, he became the centre of attention in late 2024 for all the wrong and silly reasons. The experienced second-row forward tested positive for nandrolone, a powerful anabolic steroid, during an out-of-competition drug test in August 2024. While nandrolone can occur naturally in the body in small amounts, the levels detected in Landman's sample made it impossible to explain away as anything accidental. The test was carried out by UK Anti-Doping, commonly known as UKAD. When the results came back, Landman didn't try to contest them. He accepted the finding and admitted the anti-doping rule violation. As a result, UKAD imposed a 3-year ban, which was backdated to October 4th, 2024. That means the ban will run until October 3rd, 2027. This timeline significantly impacts Landman's career, given that he was already well into his 30s at the time the ban was handed down. There wasn't much drama around the ruling. Landman didn't launch a legal battle, there was no emotional press conference, and no attempt to deflect blame. But the simplicity of the process didn't stop the rugby world from taking notice. Many were shocked because Landman had a reputation as a tough but clean player. His leadership and experience had made him a fan favourite, especially during his time with the Dragons in the United Rugby Championship. The reaction to his ban was largely one of disappointment rather than outrage. There wasn't a fiery debate over whether the penalty was too harsh or too soft. That being said, some fans did raise questions about how performance pressure affects older players and whether retirement anxiety can push them into poor decisions. Others argued that the rules are the rules, and taking nandrolone, accidentally or not, has only one outcome. The ban followed strict anti-doping protocols, and there was no indication that UKAD acted unfairly or aggressively. If anything, the case served as another reminder that doping checks happen regularly and that even long-serving professionals are not above the rules. Rugby has worked hard to maintain a clean image, and Landman's case only added to the list of examples where the sport refused to look the other way. In the end, Landman's situation is a huge lesson on how not to cheat. It shows how one mistake can cast a shadow over an entire career. Whether he intended to cheat or not, the presence of a banned substance meant a 3-year break from the game he spent his life building a reputation in. For now, he'll probably be selling his old kits online until 2027, I guess. The infamous Bloodgate scandal, the Bloodgate scandal, is arguably the most bizarre and embarrassing chapter in professional rugby history. It's actually too embarrassing for me to tell you, but hey, I got to do my job. It all started during the Heineken Cup quarter-final between Harlequins and Leinster in April 2009. The final moments of a tight game, Harlequins needed to bring back their star kicker, Nick Evans, who had been substituted earlier. But under the rules, tactical substitutions were limited, so the team needed an injury to make the switch possible. Before you knew it, Tom Williams, a Harlequins wing, suddenly appeared to suffer a mouth injury. Blood was pouring from his lips, or so it seemed. However, Williams had used a fake blood capsule hidden in his sock. He bit into it on cue to trick officials and sell the injury. The plan worked temporarily, and Evans came back onto the pitch. But somehow, this guy forgot that there were cameras all over the place, and that some people actually know the colour and thickness of real blood. What followed was a full investigation. Williams later admitted the injury was faked, and as more details came out, it was revealed that the deception was part of a deliberate team plan. The director of rugby, Dean Richards, had instructed the act. Even the club's physio was involved. The scale of the cover-up made the incident feel more like something from a scripted drama than a real sports match. Tom Williams initially received a 12-month ban, but it was reduced to 4 months because he cooperated fully with the investigation. Richards wasn't so lucky. He received a 3-year ban from coaching and stepped down from his role. The physio also received a ban, and Harlequins as a club were fined over £250,000. The fallout was huge. It went beyond rugby and into wider sports media. For many fans and commentators, it was a low point in rugby's modern era. What made Bloodgate so damaging wasn't just the cheating, it was the clear planning involved and the fact that a respected club like Harlequins had allowed this to happen. Rugby prides itself on honesty and sportsmanship. That event broke trust with fans and brought shame to the game. It's still mentioned today in discussions about ethics in sport. That being said, the swift action from governing bodies helped restore some credibility. The harsh bans showed that even high-level clubs and senior staff would be held accountable. Bloodgate now serves as a reminder of what happens when winning becomes more important than integrity, and also what happens when you buy cheap, fake blood capsules from your local dealer at half the price. Alev Kelter, dangerous stamp. In 2025, during a high-stakes test match between the USA and Canada in the Pacific 4 Series, American back Alev Kelter forgot she was a player and thought she was a donkey, allowed to kick at will. Midway through the match, Kelter was involved in a ruck situation where Canadian forward Tyson Bukaboom ended up on the ground, partially trapped beneath other players. In an attempt to free herself and continue play, Kelter repeatedly stamped down in the ruck area. Unfortunately, one of her boots made forceful contact with Bukaboom's head, drawing immediate attention from the referee and the TMO. After reviewing the incident on video replay, the referee determined the act to be dangerous and reckless, leading to a straight red card. The match continued with the USA down a player, and the incident quickly became the focus of post-match coverage. Many viewers were shocked not just by the contact itself, but by how preventable it seemed. However, others argued that Kelter's actions did not appear deliberate and were more a product of a chaotic moment in the breakdown. Following the match, World Rugby's disciplinary panel reviewed the case thoroughly. They agreed the stamping was reckless, especially given the risk of injury when a player's head is involved, but the panel also noted that Kelter had no history of foul play, showed genuine remorse immediately after the incident, and accepted responsibility for what happened. These factors helped reduce her potential ban from a longer suspension to just 3 matches. The disciplinary committee emphasised that the act did not appear to be an intentional attempt to target the head. Instead, it seemed like a case of poor judgment under pressure. They also pointed out that Kelter's apology to Bukaboom, both publicly and privately, carried weight in their decision. That being said, they made it clear that reckless contact with the head would always result in strong disciplinary measures due to the increased focus on player safety in modern rugby. The ban ruled Kelter out of the remaining matches of the Pacific 4 Series, which was a significant blow for the USA team. Kelter had been one of their most experienced and versatile backs, known for her physicality, work ethic and leadership. Losing her at such a critical time added to the controversy, with some American fans feeling the punishment was harsh given her intent. However, most neutral observers agreed that the disciplinary process was fair and necessary. So guys, which of these player bans do you find the most bizarre? Tell us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, there's plenty more rugby videos in the works. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.